Fight sports have seen a massive trend. This is something that is beyond just the success of WWE and the UFC, which are now going to be merging together under the TKO group. Fight sports as a whole has grown as a societal level of acceptance. It has gone from something that is a niche community of fighters that are predominantly more blue collar. It's not very much looked well upon from, let's say, more wealthy people, to now being a trend that people in traditionally more liberal states, even places like California, are flocking to fight sports and accepting it at the same level as something like yoga. So you have a really, really interesting market here where it's something that is shifting in society as a whole post-COVID, and it's something that looks like it could be staying long-term and potentially shifting into something that's even more significant than what's already going on right now. So the story of this is not only just the success of the WWE or UFC, it's the success of an industry as a whole, and that's why this trade is so interesting to talk about. Before I get into talking about the actual trade, I do want to quickly mention something very significant that we've been working on at Ticker Trends. This is the Ticker Trends Social Arbitrage Hedge Fund. We will be launching the Ticker Trends Social Arbitrage Hedge Fund by the end of this month, so around within a week to 2 weeks of this video being uploaded, we will be ready to start accepting capital commitments. This means getting the entire legal structure up and running within the United States. So we will be regulated within the United States. We're working with a YC-based firm to launch the fund. We're partnered with some really amazing people in the financial world who have a much more traditional finance background than myself, in combination with my experience of being more of an emerging investor, working much more on the software and technical side, where these other people that we're partnered with have much more of a traditional background to ensure the success of this new age strategy being matched with something that needs to be stable and much larger, being a hedge fund. So I'm super excited about the future of Ticker Trends and what we're working on at the Social Arbitrage Fund. If you're interested in potentially investing in the Social Arbitrage Fund, you will need to fall under some distinctions within the state of Texas, including being an accredited investor, and another distinction which I will put on screen. If you fall under these two distinctions, then you can potentially work with us in the fund, and you can send us an email, admin@navtrading.co, where I will send you a deck on the fund with updated terms and things that will actually be applied at fund launch. And also closer to when we will start accepting capital commitments, I will start to do calls again with prospective investors. With that out of the way, we can get back into the WWE trade and what's going on within the world of fight sports. I want to start with a story that everyone's kind of heard of at this point, and I think it's been overlooked from an investor perspective just because of how crazy it sounds from the very base. At this point, everyone's heard of the Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk fight potentially happening. And this is interesting, not just because, I'm saying that Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg are actually going to fight. In fact, if you look at this more recent tweet from Zuckerberg, he says, "I love this sport and I've been ready to fight since the day Elon challenged me. If he ever agrees on an actual date, you'll hear it from me. Until then, please assume anything he says has not been agreed on." So this is the context of Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk potentially having a mixed martial arts fight and actually broadcasting it to the public and making it like a public spectacle. What it seems like was the resolution to that is that Zuckerberg actually wanted to do the fight because if you aren't aware, Mark Zuckerberg has actually been very interested in mixed martial arts and fight sports more recently. He's actually been training with UFC fighters. I believe he takes it pretty seriously. He's even built an octagon, which is like the fight stage within his backyard just to practice. So of course, someone like Zuckerberg, he has infinite money to put into whatever his interests are. And it seems like right now his interest, even though you could say he's more of like, let's say a tech nerd, is getting into fight sports. So what's significant about this is not just that Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg could fight. And actually Elon Musk is friends with Ari Emanuel, who is the owner of the Endeavor Group that owns a majority stake within the UFC. So if Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg were ever to actually fight, I do believe it would be the UFC that would host it, which is huge if it ever were to happen, but it's very unlikely. That being said, what this represents is you have two tech billionaires that are discussing the possibility of doing something that just a few years ago, let's say pre-COVID, would have been seen as absolutely impossible for these types of people to even be considering doing something like this. And the reason I say that is not because it's impossible for Zuckerberg or Elon Musk to train in a fight sport, but it's because we've seen this evolution of acceptance of fight sports as a whole being a normal sport that virtually anyone can participate in. I think the beginning of this was really with the influencer fights. They had all of these boxing matches against influencer fights where you saw people like Logan Paul, Jake Paul, the two Paul brothers. You saw other influencers from the UK, including KSI and others. And then you saw these TikTokers come in. They were all doing these exhibition boxing matches. And what people discovered is that, number one, these events, even though they were kind of non-traditional and they're not necessarily professional sporting events, they discovered that events with big names doing virtually any sport, but fighting is really an easy sport for people to wrap their heads around. It gets to a very broad audience. It's easy for anyone to get into fighting and to make a massive impact with it while doing something that people have discovered to be a fun hobby, as it's a workout and it gets your anger and stress out as well. So fight sports in general have transitioned from this very niche, aggressive sport that was not widely accepted by the public. Initially when the UFC started, it was illegal in most states to even host a UFC fighting match, or let's say, I'm not sure about boxing matches, but UFC, mixed martial arts more specifically, was very frowned upon by most people. Whereas now you have this trend of tech bros and entrepreneurs, but this extends even beyond that. I've seen other successful people online that have now accepted this idea that mixed martial arts and fight sports are a normal way to work out and a normal hobby to have that is not frowned upon by society. So what this Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg fight represents is not the fact that, maybe the UFC could host this fight, which, okay, maybe they can, but it's very unlikely. What it represents is that the societal view on these fight sports is shifting from something that only, aggressive people who have been training their entire lives to fight can do, to something that a billionaire, on his yacht can be paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to a mixed martial arts trainer to come train him and fight, and to pay UFC fighters to come on his yacht and train and fight and hang out. It's become a cool thing. So this is really the massive transition that you see within fight sports. And this narrative, this story that I'm trying to build here is also shown directly within the data when we actually start to look at it. If you look at the trends for MMA and wrestling gyms, you'll start to see this story actually coming into play, right? You have people who are not just looking into the UFC and what's going on with these characters that these companies build, or even the WWE. The difference here is that more people are getting involved in these sports personally, and this then leads to an increase in viewership in the sport as a whole. Because if you're more involved in mixed martial arts on a daily basis, just as for fun, or you're bringing your kids to wrestling training or anything on that side, then those people are going to start to watch and follow these companies that are at the forefront of this industry, being WWE and UFC. So you can see this with MMA gym trends, as well as wrestling gym trends, both of which are seeing significant growth, and this is then translating into that growth of the UFC and the WWE. So when you look at the story behind this business, this industry, why these things are growing, it's because fight sports, similar to I could say another example of this recently was sports gambling. Sports gambling just a few years ago was something that was heavily illegal in many states, and now you see this huge transition to legalization of sports gambling. It's the same thing with fight sports. Fight sports was frowned upon, was not widely accepted by a lot of people, and is now transitioning from being illegal and bad in many places to saying, okay, I'm a tech billionaire. I'm going to go start training boxing or mixed martial arts or wrestling. That's like a normal thing that's happening now. And so that's why there's this cultural shift in society towards accepting these sports, which then leads to the growth of these brands and industries. And that's not to mention the success of these brands being, now you have UFC fighters that are becoming much more famous than before. You have people like Conor McGregor, who is, I believe, now retired or maybe going to eventually be going back into the fighting industry. He's become a billionaire, or at least someone who's very successful to the point where he doesn't really need the money anymore. Then you have people in the WWE like The Rock and John Cena, who have transitioned from a fighter who would just be in the WWE arena to now being massive personalities, maybe even considered A-list celebrities in movies, advertisements, many different things. So these industries are launching superstars into the world and are also growing on their own. And then that attracts more talent like Logan Paul, like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk into potentially thinking about doing fights. And then that attracts a larger audience and more people who want to get involved in mixed martial arts. So that's kind of my thesis and my understanding so far of what's going on within this industry and why it's growing. I think this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg of the story. I'm trying to compress it very much. But I highly recommend that, this is a great example of how can you deconstruct these trends and understand what's going on in the market beyond just a popularity increasing. Because it's not just the thing of, okay, more people are watching UFC on TikTok. Like, yes, that's really cool. And it's a good point to start, but why is that increase happening? Why are people watching UFC and WWE? And even if, let's say, you don't see that happening in web search trends for those companies, clearly viewership is increasing. So there has to be a reason for that. And sometimes you have to dig a little bit deeper into what's going on to have a full understanding of the story. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed that video, and I hope that interests you into looking into WWE and fight sports as a whole. I would definitely be watching the TKO group as they launch, as that will essentially be consolidation of two of the largest fight sports brands, being WWE and UFC, into one company. So I think they're going to potentially have massive power and the ability to do some really exciting things if they're able to execute on it properly. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.